Monsieur Anber.
Mr. Cassarin, good evening. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Another edition here of the Calling Russ Anber podcast. Just me and you, like the good old days after we appreciate Mike Coppinger and you're enjoying your tea again, right?
Lovely. Lovely.
Mike Coppinger was with us last week. There was a lot of fights to get to, which we will. Broner situation, some news in the boxing world. It kind of went shockwaves. We'll get to a bit later on in the purse bid for Teofimo Lopez's next bout. We're going to be addressing a bit of history. We're going to have some weigh-in. You teased the weigh-in issue and a solution to the weigh-in problem, which we'll get to a bit later on. Canelo is in action, the pound-for-pound best fighter. So, look, a lot of great topics to get to this week. We appreciate everybody who's tuning in via YouTube, the Instagram follows, the Twitter follows. Send us your feedback. Send us your comments. We appreciate you tuning in to our weekly boxing chat. And Mr. Anber, how are you doing this evening?
Comments and suggestions as well. And the reason why suggestions are important is because the reason we're going to have this moment, look back in history kind of thing, is because one of our viewers, if you want to call them that, or listeners or fans, whatever word you want to use, my sister Mac, she suggests she loved hearing about this moment in history, moments in history, right? And I thought that was really nice, that we can get to share that and someone wants to hear it. So that's because somebody asked and liked that. So suggestions, comments, and otherwise questions, keep them coming.
And we'll get to that a bit later on. So it's going to be intriguing to the boxing fans who love the history and cherish the history of the sport for the history moment that we'll get to. But for this past weekend on ESPN, in a heck of a fight that we knew going in was going to be all action, and it delivered. One of those fights that, just on paper, there's no way it cannot produce fireworks when you have the Mexican pride of two fighters who are action fighters, and Oscar Valdez and Miguel Berchelt for Berchelt's belt in the WBC, the 130-pound division, the junior lightweight division, which is near the lightweight division, and both of those right now are very hot in the world of boxing. Valdez's most signature victory, a masterful performance, a 10th round knockout against Berchelt, and a devastating knockout at that. Even a knockdown earlier in the fight, and Berchelt was hurt, but continued to fight. True warrior, blood and guts. But so many moments in the fight we can get to. I don't know. Do you want to go? You don't want to start with a stoppage? Was it too late? Was the controversy Valdez's performance? What stands out? What stands out for you a few days later from Valdez's most significant win in his career?
Matt, I'm going to say that it surpassed expectations. Why? Because the betting favorite was Berchelt. And I think I deserve to be kicked in the nuts for what I did. And it bothers me to this day. It bothers me that I was telling Brad Goodman this the other day when we spoke. And I said I had been at some top ranked shows where I had seen Berchelt fight. And I always thought that, this is a dangerous kind of fighter who, on any given moment, it could all be over because, his defense, he doesn't care about, he just swings. He wins wars of attrition, he digs deep each time to come back to his action back. Every time I see those kind of fighters, I think, I cringe, that anything could happen at any given moment. You know what I mean? There's something about a certain, I don't want to say fragility, but something could go wrong very easily. And going into the fight, when the fight was made, I thought, Valdez has a hell of a shot. And I like Valdez, and I'm picking Valdez. And I think Valdez comes with a amateur background and an Olympic experience. And, he's somebody who has understood the craft all the way up, and I said, what? I like Valdez. I'm going with Valdez. Then, not that it's a division that I necessarily have paid a lot of attention to, as the fight draws closer and there's more interest and talk and I'm looking, I see everybody, and literally everybody is picking Berchelt. And I'm thinking, what did I miss here? I know I don't pay much attention to this and I haven't really followed it closely. And I haven't, I didn't see what was going on. And I'm saying, what did I miss? So when I got a call the day before the fight from friends saying, hey, who should I bet on? I said, well, Berchelt is the favorite. Like you might want to think about putting your money on him. And he said, well, I'm getting long odds on the fight going the distance. I said, well, look, Valdez is good enough to go the distance. But I started to hedge and worry, and I wasn't committal to what I truly believed, that Valdez had the stuff to get it done. And I think, a new trainer. And then when they showed the size difference, I said, and when the weight came in that he was 146.2, I believe it was what they said on fight. And that, for all intent and purposes, could have been a little bit high, because sometimes they weigh you while you're still got your tracksuit on or whatever.
Because Berchelt rehydrated. He gained over 15 pounds, but Valdez was reported to be 140. So only a 6-pound difference the night of.
Yeah, but it's not the point of the difference in weight. It's the rehydration difference, which means that your body, as in Valdez's case, he ate, he drank for the same period of time, but only rehydrated to a certain, because he wasn't dry. He wasn't dry enough to put that back on. You cannot put on the 14 pounds, 146, 16 pounds. You can't put that back on unless your body can absorb that. Right. And that had me worried. How can you have put that much back on and be that big? And I thought, again, we always worry about the size, but sometimes size could be an enemy for you as well, and carrying it around and slowing you down. And Valdez just had, coupled with his battle plan, which was easy to see from the outset, he was going to fight a smart, calculated fight round by round. He was going to win rounds. He wasn't trying to win the fight. He wasn't trying to beat you up. He was trying to win rounds. And when you saw that, I thought the size is going to be an advantage for him. The only advantage, and I use that word loosely, that size might have made a difference. Size kept Berchelt up. When he got hurt early in the fight, I couldn't believe the power shots that bounced off of his jaw, and you could see it was indicative of the smaller guy hitting the bigger guy, hurting him, just ready to get, but not enough to drop him. It was gonna take a little longer. And he
took him a total of 3 knockdowns, and the last one, the left hook, and the left hook was the money shot for Valdez all night. Berchelt, never known for his defense, so we knew that was going to be an issue. But even though Valdez dominated, Berchelt, when he kept going forward, especially towards the ropes, he was still effective. Like Valdez, you could sense, and Andre Ward brought this up, the nervous energy was wearing. Like he was tired, and it was a tough fight for him. But Berchelt, at one point in the middle rounds, especially after the second knockdown, I think this is a perfect example of what we discussed a week prior to the fight, about corners being more involved in stopping fights. Now, I knew a Mexican war, the pride that these fighters have, the corners are not going to throw in the towel easily on the champion. That's for sure. But Berchelt took a massive beating. Like, it's going to be difficult for me to imagine him coming back to the level he was. He'll still be a top contender at 130, but it's probably like something from that loss is going to be long lasting. That type of beating has consequences.
Look, you're right. That often happens. Everyone signaled the death knell for Chocolatito, when he got beat, and said, okay, that's it. It's over. But everybody comes back from those things differently. So it's a little too early to tell. If anything, it's not necessarily the loss or the beating he took. It's what he will take going forward, when people can still get to him, and it starts to land and it starts to hurt. That eventually takes its toll more than, just the one fight and he's done. There's an accumulation effect to this. Stopping the fight. Matthew, I don't know that I could have picked out any given moment when either the referee or the corner could have said, that's it. The only, and now, you could have, on one condition, your guy comes back to the corner, and there was talk that he said in the corner, I'm fucked, right? He came back and said in Spanish, I'm fucked. Now, I don't know in what context he might have said that.
But don't forget, at one point, the corner asked him, do you want us to stop the fight?
That's the worst. That is the absolute, okay, that is the absolute worst. I'm glad you brought that up because I was going to get to that. That's the absolute worst. I hate that when a trainer asks do you want me to stop it? Well, yo, you think you're going to get the answer? You know what? Great idea. I was just thinking the same thing. Yeah, go ahead and stop it. Nobody's going to say that. No fighter is ever going to say that. Okay.
And when they do, it backfires tremendously against them. They're called quitters, all the et cetera,
of course. But the trainer saying, that's it. I'm the chief. I'll never forget the words. And I live by this. I'll never forget when Angelo stopped the fight against Larry Holmes with Muhammad Ali, with Bundini Brown pulling at his corner jacket, saying, no, one more round. And Dundee beat Bundini's arm off of him and turned to the referee and says, I'm the chief second. I'm stopping the fight. That's taking control of your corner. Not Ali sat there and let his man do the job. So, Eddie Futch, when he stopped Fraser in the Thriller in Manila, where everyone says Ali was going to quit in the corner. Ali was not going to come out. Futch made the call, and Joe's saying, no. And he says, that's it. And he called the referee over. He said, that's it. Could they have done that based on the fact that they knew there's nothing left in the tank? Maybe they could have, because they're supposed to know their fighter. But I don't know that there was any given moment that the ref could have done that. And I don't know that Berchelt would have wanted it done. And he started to get reckless, and it was the recklessness that made him walk into that final left hook, and that was all she wrote, and it was a devastating knockout. And for a minute there, a little bit scary when he was lying on his back, and you could hear the doctor trying to get some kind of reaction from him. Then all of a sudden he got it, and that was good. And Valdez showed a lot of class, but Valdez, at times in the fight, you're right. Andre Ward was right about that. It started to look like the wheels were coming off, didn't it? It started to look like the wheels were coming off, and Berchelt now was coming. He was now going to set the pace, and he's pressing. And I thought, oh man, is it Valdez? Is this going to turn now? Is this? But the kid put it together, and you know what? Credit Reynoso on what he did in that corner, of calming him down and holding him tight to the plan, and it worked out for him.
Well, Valdez with this win, and he's an impressive young man as well. The way he, I believe, the way he can speak, the way he acts in the ring, out of the ring, I think it's just going to lead him to bigger opportunities, whether it be Shakur Stevenson. I don't know. That's a tough matchup. If he goes eventually to lightweight, of course, there's a lot of great fighters right there. But you brought up Eddy Reynoso, who's also going to be in action this weekend, working with Canelo. We'll get to that fight in a bit later on, but a lot of people after the Valdez performance, you're seeing tweets by the media, other fans saying Eddy Reynoso is the best trainer in boxing. I don't know what your thoughts are. I think at times we get carried away a little bit in the prisoner of the moment situation where Freddie Roach was the best trainer when Pacquiao beat De La Hoya. And then it was Robert Garcia when Mikey Garcia was on a tear. This happens a lot where ebbs and flows. I don't think necessarily you're a great trainer or not based on 1 year performance by fighters, right? I think it's the intriguing thing to say. It's normal that people react to that way. Like when a Super Bowl champion, it's the head coach who wins that. That's the best head coach in the NFL right now. But I don't know what your thoughts are. Eddy Reynoso and his father clearly have established themselves as excellent trainers, but this debate of trying to identify who the best is, I think it's difficult to say.
I hate that moniker of the best trainer in boxing. I hate it because it's exactly like you said. When Buddy McGirt had Antonio Tarver and he beat Roy Jones, the best trainer in boxing. Manny Pacquiao has Freddie, best trainer in boxing. Okay. These are the best trainers in boxing. There's not an infinite pool of best trainers in boxing. So all these people that we mentioned, their knowledge and abilities have not diminished from last year or the year before, when they were trainer of the year, or you get entered into the Hall of Fame. Suddenly now today, oh no, you weren't as good as you were back then. No, that's nonsense. You need the horses as well. The jockey needs the horse also. That's a fact. But Eddy Reynoso has proven that he's not a one-trick pony, if you will. He's proven that he has a science, he has an understanding of boxing, he knows the game well, he works a corner well, the instructions are good, his fighters, and this is what I like, I love seeing this, and I can see it as a trainer, I can see it right away where there's a plan, they're doing something. You see the ebb and flow of what they're doing, and every time his guys fight, I see that plan. I see it transforming itself in the fight, you know? So I think he has certainly, if anybody thought that he was just, you know, riding Canelo's coattails, I think he has proven with what he's done with Garcia, you know, how he regrouped him, brought him back, you know, after getting, you know, he really got his neck twisted right off with that punch by Luke Campbell, you know, and came back up to hold it all together and win. Reynoso, I think, had a lot to do with keeping the kid calm and, you know, reassuring him that he could come back. I think he's done a lot. So is he the best trainer in boxing? I hate that. You can't say he's the best in boxing because it's a skill that you carry for the rest of your life, you know, and all the guys that we mentioned are also part of that elite group, but there's no doubt he is one of or among the best trainers in the game. He's a real pro, and that's a great thing to be, because there ain't a lot of them, brother.
Somebody who's not necessarily a great pro, I think, in the way he conducts himself, and he was more of the same this past weekend on the other network, Showtime. Adrian Broner, he wins a decision against Santiago. Many felt Santiago won, but nobody felt really much outrage for that fight. It wasn't a great fight. Broner, again, not throwing as many punches as he should. He wins. He's going to be a factor because he's vocal. He did a lot of brash interviews after the fight, especially, of course, with Brian Custer immediately on Showtime. Look, Broner was supposed to fight at 140. He fought this one at 147. I think the plan is for him to eventually compete again at junior welterweight at 140. There's some interesting fights to be made at either division, but he gets a lot of chances for the type of performances he puts on display. And I don't know at what point does he get other opportunities. He's going to get at least another one, that's for sure, probably more. But the impressions of Broner, I don't know how much you had a chance to see that fight. It happened a bit after the Valdez Berchelt result. I looked at a few rounds and it wasn't very convincing. What do we take away from Broner as far as his performance against Santiago and just your overall impressions as to what could be next for Broner?
I don't understand how, as a network where you're trying to establish your credibility as a leader in boxing, and that's Showtime is in that position. You know, they're the Showtime and ESPN are the only two networks that are still doing boxing. Am I wrong?
Well,
or Fox, I guess. Fox.
You're saying Showtime, ESPN, Fox, NBC, I'm not so sure, not much, some few cards here and there, hit or miss, but Showtime and ESPN are probably at this point leading the way now that Fox is maybe pulling back a little bit as well.
So how, as a network who's trying to drive that credibility, do you allow, you know, a fighter to come on your network and swear at your staff and your commentators and tell them that they're no good?
Whoa, wait. Look, HBO had this happen to them several times, but Larry Merchant at one point even defended himself, of course, with the infamous back and forth with Mayweather. If I was 50 years younger, I'd kick your ass.
But it wasn't Mayweather who provoked it. Mayweather was not the one who provoked. Larry Merchant was the guy who kept dissing on Mayweather, saying, oh, you shouldn't have done this. He was the one who wouldn't give Mayweather the credit that Mayweather felt he deserved. No, watch the interview. It wasn't Mayweather who came up there and started swearing, and, you know, and eventually he lost his cool and said, I don't want to talk to you anymore. So here you have a lifer like Steve Farhood who's scoring a fight. He comes up with a 1-point difference the other way, and your guest now who walks into the show, you know, uses the F-bomb, says, F Steve Farhood, you know, I don't F with him, but I'll F with you. You're cool. You know, you're cool, but I don't F with Steve Farhood. I'm not sure that really sends the message that your network is credible. I'm not sure that sends the message. It's almost become a point like it's like it's scripted wrestling. You know what I mean? Like we say these kind of crazy things and we want to smash Vince McMahon onto the commentator's table. You know, like that's almost what it seems like.
It's what Broner does. It's what you expect from Broner. And look, Showtime must have known it's not the first time he's done anything outrageous. And look, Showtime
he's done it to Al Bernstein. I've seen him do it at press conferences to Al Bernstein. I've seen him do it to Farhood. You know, listen, you want us to pay the bills. You want us to pay you to be on there to fight, you know, Santiago in a gift that you got, and you're going to treat people like that. Look, maybe that's just me. I don't know. Let the viewers decide that. But yeah. I'm just, you know, I'm almost ready to tell you the next topic because, like, it doesn't deserve the few years of breath I may have left in my lungs to be wasting it on that. You know, I just disgusts me.
Well, okay, so let's bring up this point then. Broner was supposed to fight at 140. They end up negotiating the contract a few days before because they probably realized that ain't gonna happen. So they fight at 147. The week prior to, we had the Jojo Diaz weight issue. We've had these issues throughout the years in boxing where fighters don't make weight at the weigh-ins. You talked about in the past the same-day weigh-ins, which don't really apply anymore except for a few places in the world, including the Ontario Commission here in Canada. But you've been teasing this, that you may have found the solution. So I'm intrigued as to what is your weigh-in problem solution for the fans out there.
Matt, look, it's good. It's something that could be a little bit drastic, and it could change. It changes the game a little bit and would require a little bit of study, and would also require athletic commissions to be more active in their role in protecting fighters. Okay. But before I say it, I find it insane that an entire, and forget about, I'm not even talking about the preliminary fights, your 4-rounders and 6-rounders and 8-rounders. I'm not even talking about them, but your main event fights, which usually could be championship fights or elimination fights or important fights, are promoted on networks or streaming or pay-per-view or whatever and sold as that. And your whole event, TV, the fighters, the sanctioning bodies, athletic commissions, everything is based on the trust and confidence that a fighter is going to get on a scale and make for 5 seconds and make weight. And that's what your whole show is based on. With no checking, nothing. It seems a little
They do 30-day weigh-ins. A lot of these sanctioning bodies also, they do week weigh-ins as well.
Sure, they do. They do a 30-day weigh. I've had fighters who did the 30-day weigh-in and actually had to lose weight to make the 30-day weigh-in. It doesn't offer any sense of control, nor does allowing a fighter to come in overweight, then having to deal with the fines, who gets the money, paying the guy more, fining this guy, you know, making a guy fight an over the weight match, which if something happened, God forbid something happened in that case, you know, it would be horrific to think of the repercussions of that and the lawsuits that could come of that, you know, if you did that. But there has to be, the fighters have to be accountable. They're getting paid big money. Now, again, I'm not talking about the 4-rounders and the 6-rounder. I'm talking about the guys making the hundreds of thousands or the millions to fight. How is it that when you report to camp, you have to give a medical, you know, you have to do your medical, you have to, how is it that when you come into fight week, the first thing when you check in, how come you don't have to get on an official scale by an athletic commission, say, this is my weight on the Sunday. And if you have to be 135 pounds on the Friday, you're allowed to weigh between this and this on the Sunday. Then you weigh in again on the Monday and on the Tuesday and on the Wednesday.
A lot of logistics and planning for boxing, Russ.
Yeah, a lot of logistics to weight. It's what the sport is based on. It's
wait. But you're saying that when they, first of all, not everybody arrives at the same time, depending on the location. Some people come in earlier. Some people come in closer to the fight.
Usually, no. The main event is there for fight week. There's the grand arrival. You know, you could be on a Tuesday. The fight's on a Saturday. It's fight week. Everywhere you go where there's a big fight, it's fight week.
They usually arrive on a Tuesday for a Saturday fight.
Could be a Tuesday, could be, well, so no, Tuesday is when the event starts happening. You are in there on the Monday. Monday might be the latest you're in.
But some fighters plan on some who make weight, their contracted weight, they make it without any issues, but they lose a ton of weight during that week. It's part of their plan. It's part of their, system. You're saying that you want to have a cap on how much they can lose during that week?
Why does that sound so bizarre when the IBF can institute fighters not weighing more than 10 pounds the next morning? Why do they have to control their weight and not weigh more on the next morning? Why is that any more bizarre than saying, this is what you've got to be? Now, I'm like I said, this isn't just an overnight solution, and there has to be a remedy to find out what that safe weight range drop is. Like if your ultimate weight has to be 147 on the Friday, what is a safe weight drop starting on the Monday night or Tuesday or whatever day, that this is the range you have to be in? Because I'll tell you, no fighter in history who failed to make weight on the day of the weigh-in was any closer to making it on the Monday.
Now that I agree with.
They were already overweight. There was no way they were going to get it down. They were going to struggle. They did their best. They tried. They sat in the sauna. They did it. They fell 2 pounds short. But you would know on the Monday. So you could at least, it allows the promoters a chance maybe to replace you. It gives the promoter a chance to make...
I'm sorry, but they don't replace fighters who miss weight. They just carry a percentage of penalty and they move on with the main event. And most of the times it goes off without a snitch.
Maybe. There have been fights that have been canceled outright.
If there's huge discrepancies, or if the opponent refuses the just 20% and wants more, which is his right, with the other fighter being professional, not making weight.
That's right.
But the promoters
and you know what's even worse is the guy who says, no, I signed a contract to fight this guy at 135 pounds. No, I'm not fighting him at 138. I'm not fighting him at 130. I signed to fight him at 135. And if he says no, he's not fighting, you have no idea the amount of pressure he is under from the promoters, the network. They're throwing money at him. You have to. And if he holds his ground and says no, he's blackballed, never to be used again.
No, I know that's unfair that it goes against them for doing the right thing, but so many fighters rarely decline the fight. They'll take the extra money and they say to themselves, I've sacrificed, I made weight. I want something to show for it, right? I want to fight because that's the other thing. How many of those guys don't get paid, especially their full purse, if they voluntarily say, I'm not fighting him because he didn't respect the weight?
And
they're not going to give him 100% of his purse.
And they should have to be paid because he fulfilled his contractual obligation. And it should be maybe even put the onus on the guy who didn't make weight that he has to pay the purse. You have to do something. That this just can't be that guys can just show up willy-nilly and say, I don't care. Okay, so I'm not fighting. No problem. Okay, you're not fighting. Take the onus off of the promoter as well, saying, bro, I can't help you. You have to make this weight. If you don't fight, no problem. They're gonna suspend you. And the license is suspended. You do not get to fight. There has to be something done, Matthew. It just doesn't seem right that this is allowed to go on, and we're not checking this. Yes, you say the WBC has a 7-day weigh-in. They have a 30-day weigh-in. Okay, no problem. But when they have the 7-day weigh-in, what about the 6-day weigh-in and the 5th day? Because as soon as the guy makes the weight for the 7 and says, hey, I made it. Yeah, I'm okay. No, man, I had to sweat off like I'm going to go eat. We don't know what he is on the 6th day.
You just said yourself that if no man or woman who miss weight on the scale on the Friday was any closer to making weight on the 7 days. So now if the people who made the 7-day limit, okay, then they're fine. Usually they're
fine. Usually they're fine.
That logic applies both ways. But look, I think it's definitely something that should be addressed. And I'm glad you brought up this alternative, this possible solution. What will happen? I don't know, but I will clearly be voting in favor of that type of enforcement. Because right now there's too much of kind of like this laissez-faire attitude that it's not so bad. We'll give a bit of purse, get a bit of a penalty here and go on.
I'll pay the fine. I'll pay the fine.
Yeah, because look, and Jojo Diaz ends up with a draw against Rakhimov, and people are still interested in seeing Diaz fight again. He makes a bit of an apology and moves on to the next fight. We'll see. And the next fight, go ahead.
And it's an important thing, because if it wasn't important, Mayweather would never have, enforced how important it was for the fighters to make weight. And it was heavy fines if they didn't. They all did, but when it's not enforced.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, definitely. And one fighter who's, as far as I can remember, has always been on weight, despite the fact that sometimes some of these weight clauses have not been easy. He's negotiated catch weights at times, but the pound for pound best fighter in boxing is fighting again this Saturday, Canelo Alvarez. And you know what's the most impressive thing to me, Russ? There's a lot of little points we can get to. Fighting his mandatory against Avni Yildirim, the WBC mandatory. A lot of people are not happy about this fight taking place because they would love to see Canelo fight the big names, everybody else. But Canelo has a plan and he's being active. And we talked about this with Dan Rayfield a few weeks ago. What are you going to do? The guy has a mandatory that he's willing to fight. He's willing to fight up to 4 or 5 times a year. And people still want to complain. And when he's 30 years old, this is going to be his 58th professional fight. That's another impressive stat to me that doesn't talk about as much, because how much of the ring experience, you used to talk about this so much for young fighters, the developmental fights, give them 20 fights that are going to be developmental fights. They're not going to be wars. They're not going to be tough fights. And look at the benefits down the road, what will happen. Now, I know in Mexico, you can turn professional at the age of 15, which Canelo did. So that gives you a bit of an edge. He's been fighting pro for 15 years. But the fact that he's going to be again in the ring against Yildirim, I think is a good thing, a few months removed from his win against Callum Smith.
I think it's absolutely great for boxing. It's a throwback move. Let's look. Name a great. Name any great fighter you want, and you can easily pick an opponent that they fought that, might have even been worse than Yildirim. Somebody. So great fighters fight these kind of fights. I think he's fulfilling his mandatory. He's so good. He's so good that the number one contender is looked at as an easy fight for him. That's a little bit sad that the entire world is looking at Yildirim as being absolutely zero threat to him, because that's how good he is. So he's so good that instead of resting on those laurels, he's fulfilling his obligations. Let him fulfill it. No problem. He has fought everybody they put in front of him. I think it's absolutely great that he's doing it.
Yeah, and he's talking about already the fight is agreed to. If he wins against Yildirim and no injuries, no cuts, he's going to fight Billy Joe Saunders. If he wins that fight, he wants to fight to unify the titles in the fall against Caleb Plant. So he has a plan. He's fought big names before. It's not like he's ducked any fighters. I think people are unfair. Now, for those who don't know Yildirim, and we've talked a little bit about this in the past, but now the fight is coming up. You worked with Yildirim. You've seen him up close. The Durrell fight is something we talked a lot about. What style, it's going to be a massive, massive upset. I believe it's about a 15-1 underdog in most places. If you were to be causing issues or do even better, or wait a second, this fight, it turns out to be more of a challenge for Canelo than we anticipated. How does that happen for Yildirim to be winning rounds, to be creating issues for Canelo? What needs to happen? What can he do?
Canelo has to be really off, because Avni's a good fighter. I was in the corner when he fought Durrell. He's a tough game guy. He believes in himself. He's mentally tough. He's strong. He'll come to fight. I don't believe that he's going to go in there and kind of say, okay, cash the check time. See you. I don't think that's going to happen. It might look like that's what's happening because Canelo is so good, but I don't think he's going in there with that kind of intent. I think he's going in there to say, we're going to shock him. I come here to fight. He's well respected in his country in Turkey. He's been around a long time. He's fueled by Ahmet Oner, who's possessed to win. Ahmet loves to win. You know what I mean? And he puts that off on the fighter. It has a big impact on him. But yes, he is a huge underdog. There's no doubt about it. I wish I could have been in that corner again with Yildirim, because I know that I'd have been proud, win, lose, or draw, to come out of that saying this guy gave it his best shot, as I was proud to be in the corner when he fought Durrell, and gave it his all against Durrell. And as a result of that fight is why he is the number one challenger today for Canelo. Unfortunately, your number one challenger to a legend.
Yeah, and I think for Yildirim, if he ends up having even better than expectations, because the expectations are so low for him right now going into this fight, it's going to give him probably more opportunities to continue in the super middleweight division. A lot of times, this is the business of boxing, where if you're able, not necessarily to win, but you're able to impress, you're able to be in the spotlight, keep the attention of the fans, and say, "I want to see this guy again." That, in a sense, could be a win-win for him. But what's going to be very difficult, I think, as well, is the fact that he's going to be in his first fight in 2 years. Canelo was in 2 months ago fought against the number one contender probably in the entire division, not just by a sanctioning body, but the best super middleweight on paper probably besides Canelo was Callum Smith. Canelo defeats him easily in a sense, really, when you look at it. And now Yildirim, that's his challenge, 2 years inactive. Look, I just think if Canelo's able, though, to stop Yildirim, would that surprise you, or do you think that's even a possibility with the strength and power you saw up close of Canelo against Callum Smith?
Oh, it's a big possibility, and plus, Yildirim has been stopped before, so it is a possibility. There's no doubt about it. You just hope that Yildirim has learned from that. He's improved, he's developed, he's matured, and he's able to handle it. But I'll tell you what, the one thing that I noticed above all with Canelo, even more so than the power and the speed, is the defense and the intensity. He makes you fight a fight, even when he doesn't look like you're fighting a fight, even when he's just pressuring you. Loma and Usyk are great at that as well. They tire you by the pressure they put on you. They set a pace, even not necessarily by saying, "Oh, we're throwing a lot of punches." And I think that was evident with the Kovalev fight against Alvarez. He started not throwing punches for a bunch of rounds, but he still had Kovalev under intense pressure. And that impressed me, was the amount of pressure. In 2 steps, he's right on you. You move, he's right on you. You move, he's right on you. So, you've got to be able to sustain the pressure that Canelo Alvarez puts on you. And he's special, man. He's special.
Listen to this, Russ. We have a sponsor on the show. And for those of you who would be maybe interested in making a prediction, now, hopefully, like you last week with Berchelt Valdez, you gave some people wrong advice. That's why don't give any advice on this one here. You've heard what we had to say. Do you think Yildirim has a chance to maybe pull the upset of in the world of boxing? You think Canelo stops Yildirim? Whatever you think is going to be the case, bet99.com is the place to go. It's Canada's newest online sports book and casino. You can be sure to check out their player props, bet builder, and their free life bet bonuses. And listen to this. If you use the code Boxing99 over the weekend for any of your pick, whether it's Canelo, Yildirim, somebody else, there's a lot of fights going on, they'll match up to $600 your bet. You bet $100, they'll give you 100 free credit. So check them out on bet99.com and the code Boxing99. I think I was not so bad for the first promo read that we had to do here on the show, and hopefully one of many more to come.
And Canadians can remember that easily because 99 is an easy number to remember in Canada.
Are you referring to Wayne Gretzky? Is that it?
I am indeed. You have to ask that. Are you not in Canada where you are? Yes. Yes.
Yes. Well, and speaking of money, not 99, but something that kind of sent shockwaves throughout boxing today, as we're recording this here a few hours before, a purse bid for Teofimo Lopez is mandatory defense against Kambosos this today, IBF mandatory. Triller comes out and outbids Ludabella, Kambosos' promoter. They outbid Top Rank, Lopez's promoter, and they make a $6 million bid. And you might say, who's Triller? And you, Russ, had an experience with them firsthand. You were their first big pay-per-view event with the Tyson Roy Jones exhibition when you had Jake Paul against Nate Robinson on the undercard. Now Jake Paul's with them again for his fight against Ben Askren, the MMA fighter, former UFC fighter, in the boxing match. And now this is huge. It could, like, if they outbid Top Rank, I think by over $2 million. That was the other highest bid. Lopez
they doubled it. I think Matchroom was like at 3.25, and Top Rank was at 275, somewhere in that vicinity. I don't remember the exact number, but it was Top Rank was the lowest, and Matchroom came in at like 3.25, if I'm not mistaken, and they doubled it with 0.18 or something.
That's exactly
like
right. It's just 6.018, and Matchroom, you're right, at 3.5, and Top Rank at 2.3. So look, it's interesting. This is what happens with the risk when you go to purse bids. Do you think we see this in boxing? Like these shifts in momentum, these shifts in decades where who's the powerhouse promoter? And for a long time now, the last few years, Al Heyman made a big splash, was going to maybe try to take over and be the sole big promoter. That isn't just the case. The Zone and Matchroom now were a big factor. Top Rank's been a factor for years. Golden Boy with Richard Schaefer was trying to be the big name on the block. You had Main Events for a long time. It was really kind of the stranglehold. Don King. Could Triller be a factor, or you're not sure yet? Like, we don't know much about who these people are that are behind that type of money to give out in purse bids.
That's the thing. And I think the danger in all of this is, it's great that the fighters can make that money. Hats off to Lopez for being able to make that money. If he can make that, good for him. Kambosos as well, make the money. Okay, their promoters even are going to make money based on that, because they're going to get their share, being the rights holder of those fighters. The thing you just have to wonder is, and I guess I'm not an expert in the stock market, but there are things where when they try to dilute stock, make it less valuable, then buy it back up and drive the price up and all this kind of stuff. I just wonder, is this a fair market value price for this fight? And if it's not, then how are you subsidizing it? How are you going to make up the numbers to give these fighters what you've bid on? You're going to have to attach it to something else. You're going to have to cross over an event. You're going to have to try to draw from different streams of audiences. But when you look at it in the conventional way that the people that have been in the game, whether it's Matchroom or Top Rank or Lou, when you're in the game, you think, okay, this is what I need to pay them. This is how many I have. This is what I have to sell. How many seats I have to sell. How many pay-per-views I have to sell. How much I have to get from a TV revenue. How much I can get for rights. How much I can get for a site fee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was our way of thinking. And you did the math and you added it up and, okay, this is what the bottom line is going to end up being. And now you're doing the math. Nobody I've talked to today, as quickly as it was since the news broke, nobody was able to put 2 and 2 together to equal 4 to say, how are you going to arrive at $6 million just in purses?
But I don't think it's always. There has to be probably a bit of risk in the assessment of Triller making this bid, because even Al Heyman, when he kind of made a splash, he lost money in some of these events. Like, you're not always just going to make money when you're making that type of investment in the fighters. But if Lopez and Kambosos fight on the undercard of a Jake Paul, Ben Askren crossover bout or a Holyfield Tyson exhibition, I guarantee you'll get the casual sports fans, you're going to get the social media fans, and then you're going to get the boxing fan. You're going to merge 3 audiences into one, and that could be profitable. Despite the fact that we're dealing in a pandemic, that there's no guarantee of how many people are going to be able to have in the seats.
You just hit the nail on the head. I'm not so sure about a Jake Paul thing. That might be just added extra gravy on it. But Holyfield Tyson has to be the one that's going to generate the money. However, that said, if you had Holyfield Tyson, why would you need to spend an extra $6 million in purse to get Teofimo and Kambosos?
It's because you want to try to make a splash and say, we are going to be legitimate in not only doing these exhibitions, but we want to be invested in boxing. I look forward to hearing from these Triller people a bit more, because we're kind of in the dark. We're not hearing much. We don't can put a face to a name of the company, of the brand. I know Mike Tyson is probably, I believe he's somewhat involved with this company behind the scenes as well. Look, I think it's interesting, because if they are involved in boxing and then they can say, listen, this is the exhibitions, but look, we're also bringing you the top names in the sport as well. Hey, it's open season. It's good news for the fighters. That's always the best thing. The fighters are the winners in this. If there's more competition, that means wages go up, of course. Their fights and their purses do go up. The only issue is that sometimes what happens with networks, the more networks you have, the more fights you have, the more, not fights, actual fights in the ring, but fights between promoters as to who fights on what network, who fights on what platform. And that's how sometimes you end up getting now Lopez against his mandatory, and already Matchroom saying, Lopez is running away from Devin Haney. He's supposed to fight Ryan Garcia. Are these big names going to fight each other, or they're going to find other platforms to make big money fighting lesser opponents, or at least lesser attractive opponents? That's going
Matt,
to be
I'd like to put out a question maybe to the people who watch this, and if someone has an answer, or maybe you do,
they'll get a mug.
What's that?
If they get the answer right, they get a mug. Is that it?
Oh, we can do that. Has there ever been a case where two promoters in a purse bid, the champion and challenger, have lost the bid to a third party?
Oh, I'm sure.
There must be, right? There must be, right?
I'm not recalling it off the top of my head, but I know it's happened in the last. I guarantee it's happened in the last 5 years.
No problem. So it's happened. Has it ever happened where the winning bid was twice the price? Matchroom was bidding on Kambosos' behalf, right?
I think Matchroom was just trying to be a third party in this.
Or were they just a third party?
Because Kambosos is promoted by Lou DiBella. He's not promoted by Matchroom.
But he fought his last. I wonder if there's any ties to that because he fought his last fight for Matchroom. I don't know. I don't know. It would be interesting to see what fight, how often that happens. But my point that I was trying to make.
Matchroom and DAZN that we're combining, according to Dan Rayfield, of course, a great reporter on, and you can follow him now with the Substack Nation here. And I think that also Ryan Kavanaugh is the name of the Triller executive. But yeah, it was DAZN, and Matchroom was the second highest bid.
So I'm just trying to figure how the damage that does, that you have the rights to your fighter, and in this case, Top Rank. I don't know what their feeling is on this, but I'm thinking, network-wise, you have the guy who just beat the best fighter in the world in Lomachenko. ESPN is saying, we got the guy, that's the guy. I mean, imagine all the pre-fight hype you would be able to put together in building up this fight, even if you don't care about Kambosos, even if that doesn't matter. Imagine all the visuals you can put together with knockouts and the win over Loma that you could do to promote and market and sell and put it on the network across America, across the world, that you've got Teofimo Lopez in his first title defense.
Well,
oh no, you don't.
Listen to this. Listen to this quote. What he's going to say. Listen to this quote because it ties in with what you're saying here. ESPN can't be thrilled at all. A lot of people must be disappointed. Look what Teofimo Lopez, his quote is. I love ESPN and the platform and everything they have done for Team Lopez and the takeover. However, I am very thankful that my team and I stuck to our guns. We knew what we were being offered was disrespectful, and we expected the open market would value us differently. It showed today. The $6 million offer from Triller right there says that Top Rank doesn't value the best fighter on their roster. End quote. So that's strong words from Teofimo. So ESPN can't be thrilled, having invested a lot of time, and they were showing him even this past weekend. Lopez again was somewhere in attendance for the Berchelt Valdez fight. He was in supporting Richard Comey 2 weeks ago in the lightweight division on ESPN, and now he will be taking his talents elsewhere. And I'll get to the final topic of this evening, Russ. It's our history lesson that we teased. 57 years to this day. It's the first Ali-Liston fight. Ali back then was Cassius Clay, eventually towards Muhammad Ali. And the fight that shook up the world, and the fight with Ali and Liston, there's so many memories. And it was the fight, of course, that legitimized Ali, that the media disliked him, disliked the fact that he was vocal, was brash. And even though he had won the Olympic gold medal for the United States, people thought Liston would destroy him. And really, I don't know what's your ultimate takeaway from that moment in time, but it definitely is probably one of the most historic performances because it led to what is Muhammad Ali being the greatest of all time. Not necessarily the best fighter pound for pound, but certainly when you combine what he did outside the ring and in it, he is the greatest in that sense. The rematch was not obviously 57 years ago, But let me get your thoughts on that matchup. And I want to ask you a question before we leave here on the rematch, the infamous punch, whether it landed or not. But we'll get to that a bit later. First, let me hear what you have to say about the first fight.
That was a lovely preamble, by the way. That was nice. And I mean, contrary to what people might think, I was not working any corners that night when
you had a night off, huh?
When Clay fought Liston. But being the fan and the student of the game that I am, and how much I love this sport, I dug into it, and I want to know about Muhammad Ali. Maybe the greatest and most recognizable figure. One of the most recognizable figures on earth in the history of Earth.
He's behind you right now, next to Bernard.
There, yeah, that's right, right there, yeah.
Isn't he also above you as well? I believe.
Yeah. Oh, and oh yeah, of course, in there. Yeah, I'm looking here. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so go ahead.
What always bothered me about that fight? I shook up the world because I was a 7-1 underdog. 7-1 underdog. Now, while I'm talking, bring up his record while I'm talking to you, and explain to me, outside of hatred, pure, wishful hatred, how do you make a guy who was the Olympic gold medalist, undefeated, had beaten quality fighters to get where he is, including Doug Jones, among others, how do you make that guy a 7-1 underdog? If Muhammad Ali, or at the time Cassius Clay, was a 7-1 underdog, what would anybody else in the division have been as an underdog against Liston? If he was 7-1,
well, wasn't Liston...
where were the boxing experts, the guys who, Angelo Dundee was never ever surprised by that win happening. He never doubted it. Like, you saw it in the way he conducted himself. I spoke to him numerous times about this. He never questioned that they were going to win the fight. Never questioned it. Never questioned Ali's heart. He says, there's clips of, this is what we need. We need more of this in boxing. We need more people like Ali. Boxing was dying till he came along. He's right. What made the so-called experts, and now I look at them as haters, that you wanted this guy to lose so bad, you made him a 7-1 underdog?
2 points to that. Didn't Ali, in his fight right prior to Sonny Liston against Henry Cooper, wasn't he rocked by Cooper in the first time he had shown any sort of defensive injuries for that fight? Wasn't that the fight where Cooper either had hurt Ali, and it was the first time that Ali had ever shown signs of kind of being hit hard? And wasn't Liston demolishing everybody his way and kind of had this larger than life persona of not necessarily outside the ring? He was a very quiet guy and not really a vocal one, but inside the ring was demolishing fighters. Wasn't that the two combination factors that might have led to that?
Look, you can go as well and look at his record leading up to the Ali fight or the Clay fight. I wish I should have had this record up on my screen so that I could read it and tell you boom,
well,
boom,
I can give you some names that Liston defeated before losing to Ali, if you like.
Yeah, please.
Yes, and Liston had lost, though, a decision against a man by the name of Marty Marshall early in his career.
Okay, let's just go. Don't even do that. I mean, he lost to Marty Marshall, but go back to like the fight before Liston.
Floyd Patterson, the fight before the rematch. Yeah, knocked Floyd Patterson out twice in the first round.
Twice. That's right. That's the one. That's the one that made and dropped him a total of 10 times in 2 fights. It was dropped. That was the destruction. That was he blasted Patterson out of there. So did Ingemar Johansson. I'm not sure that quantified to make Clay a 7-1 underdog. Who was the fight before Patterson?
It was a man by the name of Albert Westphal, a first-round knockout win. Howard King, after that, he had knocked him out in the 3rd round. He had a decision win against Eddy Reynoso in the 12th round.
Eddie Machen. It was a decision against Machen, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the only decision he had in about a span of 10 fights. He even knocked out Cleveland Williams in the 2nd round in 1960.
1960. This is 64 now when they're fighting. This is 64, okay?
Correct.
And Eddie Machen, you can watch that fight. Liston is not overly impressive. Now, Machen's a great fighter. You know, Machen was a good fighter, good defensive fighter, you know. Good fighter that went, you know, the distance with Sonny Liston. I still, you know, Ali was big. He was fast. He moved. He floated. He beat guys that, you know, wow, he beat guys and easily. The only one, maybe the Doug Jones fight was one that, you know, he struggled more than he expected to. But the others, like, go back, read the names of Ali's fights before the Liston fight, who he beat.
Well, besides Henry Cooper, which we just mentioned, he wins in the 5th round and knockout. He had defeated Doug Jones. He defeated Charlie Powell, Archie Moore in the 4th round knockout victory. Although Archie, I think at that point, you know, as well past his prime, but you know, Alejandro Lavarente, Billy Daniels,
Lavarente, Sonny Banks.
Sonny Banks, he had won it by a 4th round knockout in 1962.
Yeah.
Well, we could go all night, Russ. I don't know what your final takeaway is of this or your final thoughts.
My takeaway on this, okay. I was just trying to say that I don't see how you could have made Cassius Clay a 7-1 underdog in the fight. I think he was a legitimate #1 contender. Like I say, if he was #1 contender and he was a 7-1 underdog, what would everybody else have been going in against Liston? I always felt that those odds were stacked more from hatred than from expertise and knowledge. Because when you watched Clay fight, when you watched or Ali fight, and he's moving and that, you're thinking, this is going to be a nightmare for Liston. This is not going to be easy. You can't hit this guy with a handful of rice. Everybody, though, thought for some reason that Liston was this big, overpowering guy that was going to crush the smaller Clay, the smaller Ali. And he would come into the ring and he'd wear towels around his chest and make him look big with his robe on. And if you watch the film, and I mentioned this back in days when I did classic fights and whatnot, if you watch the film of that fight, when they're brought to the center of the ring, Liston in his sullen look comes to the center of the ring like this and then goes and realizes he's looking up at Muhammad Ali. Muhammad was a big man, 6'3", danced, moved, fast. He realized then this was not the small Floyd Patterson that he had blasted out in 2 rounds, who was susceptible to getting hit and who stood in front of you. And as soon as you hit him, he was going to, some power puncher like Liston was going to hurt him. This was a guy that danced. And if ever you watch a fight where you say, look how beautiful he is, look how great he is, that's the fight that showed everything that was to become Muhammad Ali. Not only the speed, the fluidity, the jab, dancing, the defense, where he's right there thinking he's going to get hit. He does this, whoop, 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 and 3 punches miss Ali right away. Liston swinging, nothing happened. And then he also shows heart. Dundee had to help him a little bit. But when he got the Munsell solution in his eye and couldn't see, and he's in the corner and he's blinking and ready to go, and he says, you got to stop this, Angie. You got to show them there's wrongdoing going on here. Angelo says, we don't cut the gloves off in the big time, you know. Out. His instructions were run. And he started moving, and he knew that was something he had to get over. So he showed the heart to overcome that and come back and dominate Sonny Liston. And there's so much to be said about the man's character and what he did against somebody like Liston. It's really remarkable how great he looked that night, the speed, everything he had, put it together against somebody who the so-called experts thought was gonna crush him. And I think he proved in that fight that you weren't an expert when you were making those odds. You were not an expert. You were just a hater wishing that he was going to get beat and get knocked out.
What about the rematch? In total and in final this evening, did he land the punch against Liston in the rematch?
Even if he did land the shot, I mean, it almost looks on film that he does clip him. The question is wasn't whether he landed the shot. The question is, should that shot have kept him down for a count of 10? That's the question, because he got hit way cleaner in the first fight.
He
Speaking of
got
Liston.
hit. Oh, boom, oh, boom, boom, boom. You know, he got shook. You know, he took some shots. His legs went, and they said, "Oh, Liston's hurt." You know, and then this little tap, kind of like he's moving back, and he clips him and drops him. You know, it was a good little clip, but the body language didn't sell it right, and that's why it was always perceived as the phantom punch. And you know, I don't like to look at that because there's so many stories of, you know, why he did it. Did he take a dive? You know, what happened? But the first fight, you know, this was just beautiful. The performance that Ali put on that night. And Liston swung and he tried and he chased him and took it to him. And he used everything he knew about boxing. Okay, jab him. Oh, he's not there. Go to the body. He's swinging at the body. He's not there. You know, and I'm getting hit. The speed. He never dealt with that kind of movement, hand speed, precision. You know, they were like lasers coming at him. You know, that was really great. And that it's incredible that kind of fight defined what Muhammad Ali was to become for the rest of his career.
We'll have a chance to talk about Muhammad Ali at different times, of course, during this podcast, as we hope to continue for weeks ahead. There's so much to talk about when it comes to historical figures, and we're fortunate to have a historian and none other than Monsieur Russ Anber, and it's called Calling Russ Anber for a reason. I believe it's all the time we've had again this evening. I think we even went over anticipated time, but look, we appreciate everybody tuning in. We appreciate everybody sending comments, sending reviews. If you have an answer to that purse bit question, by the way, Russ will be delivering you a rival mug, not personally, but we'll send it via mail to whatever location you may need. So please feel free to reach out. And I don't know, any final words this evening, Mr. Anber? Any want to say bye to the fans?
I think it's great. And this is the anniversary of greatness. You know, when he burst onto the scene and said, "I shook up the world. I shook up the world. I'm a bad man." And that's what he was.
And people should definitely, if you don't know yet, it's Black History Month. Ali, of course, has been talked about a lot throughout the month. Read up on the man. Watch as many videos as you can. It will not only be great for your boxing knowledge, it will also be great to see the human being he was. Sorely missed, and we'll be honoring his memory throughout not only this week, but throughout the weeks. Any chance we have, we'll get to talk about Muhammad Ali. Have a good evening, Mr. Anber.
You got it, brother.
Take care, everybody.